So our scripture today is from the Sermon on the Mount, which is Matthew 5 through 7. And it's from 6, 22 and 23. The lamp of the body is the eye. If your eye is sound, your whole body will be filled with light. But if your eye is diseased, your whole body will be in darkness. And if the light inside you is darkness, how great that darkness will be.
Peggy always does a great job reading the scripture. And then she reads scripture in general, so I know she loves scripture. And it's good to have one person. This is a sermon for the rest of you heretics. Which is actually kind of a good start for my sermon, because when I was younger, covers a large span. When I was younger, I was taught that Christianity means believing in Jesus. And I went through youth, I went through seminary, and never heard an alternative view to that until I started discovering Eastern religion and mystical versions of Christianity. We're in a series on the Sophia passages, which are in the Catholic Bible, because they're based on the Greek translation. And it covers a period between the Christian and the Jewish, traditional Jewish scriptures that were where religion was universal, it was reasonable, and it was compassionate. Jesus is one expression of that, but there were a lot. There were a lot. And that's always sort of the heart of healthy religion anyway, but it gets lost. And all you have to do, Exhibit A is the United States of America, where religion has gone insane in many cases, is not reasonable, is not universal, and is not compassionate. And some of the people that preach the loudest on Jesus' behalf silenced the Sermon on the Mount on behalf of Luther and Calvin and this kind of thing. So we're going back in time to this period that I think Jesus represents. I think a lot of the mystical Christian and Jewish and atheist, this is not copyrighted by anybody. But the Sophia passages are particularly enlightening. And I don't know about you, I'm enjoying the series because I feel it unpacks a lot of what I've been preaching on for however long it is I've been preaching. And in many ways it was based on the Eastern religions of the world and also mystical Christianity. But I think holding traditional Christian texts up to the Sophia, the mystical passages, is incredibly revealing that Jesus was talking from a much deeper place than I was taught. Not only as a kid, but also in seminary. And I think most people have known that inside their heart, that it has to be deeper and smarter than what I was taught. But you give the preacher the benefit of the doubt, which is a terrible mistake. Don't ever do that. If what the preacher is saying does not resonate in your heart, in your wisdom, then I just keep on moving if I were you. Hopefully these passages are doing that for you. You feel like some kind of sense of recognition of truths that you know but have been hard to put in words. We need a kind of warning label on this particular passage. First of all, because it's a horrible, horrible mistake to use blindness as a metaphor for ignorance. Right? That's What Jesus is talking about is deeper than our physical sight. But through the ages, people have used the language of disability to try to get across problems, which itself is a problem. So I'm not going to be talking about darkness. What it's talking about is light versus shadow. Being able to discern something or not being able to discern something. And it's definitely not talking about the senses. It's not talking about human sight. The second thing that I think is just as important in the United States is to realize that Christianity in the United States has a shameful link to racism, imperialism, the colonization of other people, the dehumanization of other people. And this idea of light and dark has also played into that, which is why when you look at devils, they're very dark skinned. When you look at angels, it looks like they all came from Sweden. Right? This embodies what we see politically. And so the subject of religion is not just for nerds. I mean, it is for nerds. But if you're trying to unravel how this nation went insane, really from the gate, from the Pilgrims. When we talk about America falling into fascism, yes, fascism is increasing, but the nation's always been fascism to most of the people who live in this hemisphere. So we need to kind of reframe what we're doing. But to realize again, we're talking about the ability to perceive versus the ability, the inability to perceive. Now there's a key word there that got translated diseased, if the eye is diseased. Our translation is really good on gender issues. It can be horrible as far as the original Greek and the theology of it. This is a word that has various meanings. One of the ways it gets translated is if the eye be clear, which we'll look at that. Are you able to perceive things directly, or is religion like wax paper taped across your face, keeping you from discerning people who are different than you? Second thing is it healthy? And that's the way the translation went. Are you looking at life from the viewpoint of your pain, the terrible traumas that have happened to you? Because that's going to affect how you see the world. And then finally, are you using your own experience to explain everything? Are you taking what happens to you and just magnifying that and trying to apply it to everybody else, no matter how different they are? I think this parable is trying to help us perceive more. The Jesus I was taught didn't care what you thought. The Jesus I was taught only cared that you believe in him as the only way. And I think that's the best that a lot of my teachers could do, but it's not the best we can do when it comes to going into the mystical and realizing that, like our first hymn, when Jesus says, I am, he's not talking about himself. He's speaking as life itself, as the energy of the cosmos. And he's trying to help us find that within ourselves. So we're going to walk through this passage and see if it helps call us to our awareness. The first way that the passage gets translated is the eye is the lamp of the body. If the eye is not sound, if it's not clear, it's not transparent, then it becomes darkness and it fills the body. But you think that darkness is light, so it's very misleading. Okay, those words don't make a lot of sense, I admit. So let's look at the Sophia passage and see if this unpacks it somewhat. If your eye is bad, light can't get in. If your reasoning is bad, wisdom can't get in. Can you see that it's not really talking about sight? It's using the image of your eye to talk about something deeper than that. Your ability to perceive. If your eye is bad, for whatever reason, the light can't get in, if you've rejected wisdom, see, this brand of Christianity isn't about belief. It's about your awareness. And this isn't a teacher who wants you to shut down your mind. This teacher is trying to inflame your mind, to broaden it, to deepen it. So he says, obstinacy comes to a bad end. To tempt danger is to tempt death. That could be said more poetically, for sure. Stubbornness, obstinacy, leads to stupidity. Again, not real poetic. Sinner stacks sin on sin. There is no cure when disaster afflicts the arrogant. Think about this nation and the things that are tearing us apart. And then think about that phrase. There's really no, when affliction hits arrogant people, there's no real solution to it because the problem is inside us. The reasonable take the Proverbs to heart. Every sage is a good listener. And that's the key line there. This is calling us to awareness, not to belief. To wisdom, not just to reason. There's not really a good word for it. That's why they shifted from logos, which is the Greek, for that kind of mechanical philosophy kind of stuff, to Sophia, which is embodied wisdom. And it's saying that if you're not perceiving right, nothing else is going to bail you out. Right? If you and I are talking and I cannot hear what you're saying because I'm so inside myself, if I'm so brainwashed by religion that I can't hear what you're saying unless you put it in my cliches, then there's really nothing external to do to be helpful. I'm on a collision course with reality itself. And there's a huge section of the church in the United States that embodies the inability to perceive another person who's different. And what our passage is saying is that's when you think that your belief is light, is perception, then that darkness puts everything, that shadow keeps us from perceiving anything of worth. The more study I do, if I have a prejudice, the more I'm going to prove what I already believe. How many people have you known that done studies online? And it's crazy stuff. But they keep going back to the things. They're not testing to see whether it's true in the first place. They're just looking for things that prove what they already believe. And they think of that as science. See, science is a method where you test yourself to see if your perceptions work in the real world. Just going through the internet and finding scientists that agree with you, that's not science. So, our passage is saying, when you start with your prejudices, when you start with your beliefs, and let's face it, if you believe something you're not testing it, that's what the word prejudice means. You can be absolutely right. If I take something like the Christian message, it can be 100% right, but if I don't understand it, I can misuse anything I read. And in a changing universe, yesterday's truth is always a problem today. Right? So it's not saying that the text is wrong, it's saying you have to approach it with a certain awareness, or it becomes the problem that you're trying to solve. So in a lot of the mystical traditions, there's a saying, be your own candle, be your own lantern. Take it on yourself to test your perceptions. And believe it or not, one of the best ways is to stop talking and listen, which is the punchline of this passage. One of the most helpful things I've found in my life is when somebody says something that I'm not really crazy about, I repeat it and say, is that what you said? And before we go on, until they say yes, I just keep listening. Those little moments are where belief can become perception again. Be your own candle. The second way that the word gets translated is it healthy? Is it diseased? And in this case, a lot of times when we look out the world, we look out through our pain, through our trauma. And that doesn't make us bad. That's very human to do that. At the same time, we build our own prison of shadows. Because I've been hurt in the past, I don't trust you enough to try to have a relationship. I'm not perceiving the current moment. And it's a very human thing to do. When we hurt, we pull in. That's a survival mechanism. It doesn't make us wrong, but I think what this teaching is saying is, just don't think that's the light. There's something better waiting for you. Go ahead and process, heal, all of that. But don't think the current pain is going to last from now on. It feels like that, you're sure of that, but it's not true. Everything changes. The more we study out of our pain, the more we just reinforce the pain. The more we prove, the more, I came up with a saying I think is pretty good. Don't tell anybody, because now we're copyrighted and become famous. But I was thinking the other day that love can walk on water, but fear can drown on dry land. At least in my experience. That if I haven't found the handle on my fears and my pain and my depression, my brain will kick out examples that prove that prove that I should be depressed, that prove that I should be in despair. So we need something deeper than that. And in the mystical writings of Sophia, it talks about being a prisoner of the shadows. And we carry those with us. And our brain is pumping out fearful things all over the place, which has happened to a lot of people in this country. Do you know there are people that are afraid of refugees? The most helpless people, the most courageous people. And yet, people are talking about bravery and courage and stuff, and they're terrified of anybody that's crossing our boundary. And again, the insanity is the people we're afraid of were here first. We stole from them, we murdered them, and now we call them illegal. That's insane. That's what Jesus is talking about. That's an insanity that proves itself. If you want examples of that, please study the works of Governor Abbott. If you want to see heavily armed ignorance, or the governor of Florida, there are lots of examples right now. But we can't get out of that unless we heal. And the people that are trapped in that are not bad people, and they're not stupid people. And we're not going to get rid of it just by fighting it. There's going to have to be healing. So a lot of what Jesus was calling people to do in another empire a long time ago in a faraway place was to do that. It's not the total answer, but don't become reactive to evil. Don't let that push your buttons. Don't let fear, despair, depression push your buttons. Now, sometimes you can't help it, but just make a date for something better for yourself when that happens. Be a candle for yourself. Shine a light on things that are pleasant in your life. Choose your hopes over your fears. Then the third thing is that idea that's so hard to understand. The translation that says, if your eye is single, then your body will be filled with light. And I think a lot of this is helping us to spot dualism, but also a fragmented view of the world. When you think the people from Mexico or Honduras are strangers, your vision is broken, right? You don't realize that's your human family. And when you think the billionaires are your friends, and the people fleeing what this country did to their country are your enemies, that's broken vision. And one of the worst things that happens to a person of privilege is we start with our own experience and then project that on everybody else. Why can't people be more like me? There wouldn't be any problem. If people would just be like me, look how hard I've worked. You know, I was saying this to my maid the other day. She was on her 200th hour in the week. I was on the golf course, and it's insane, but it's hard to catch ourselves. That the hardest working people in the country are being called lazy. And the people whose only virtue is they were born to somebody rich are writing books on self-help. So there's a couple of quotes in our passage that I don't want to leave behind, but in the Sophia passage we're looking at, there is no cure when disaster afflicts the arrogant. A stubborn heart will have many a hurt. See, when I think I'm at the center of everything, and I think that your biggest problem is you're not like me. Now, you've all seen through me by now. So that doesn't bother me. But there are lots of people. If you're a guy, you probably think if women were more like you. Is that? Yeah. Don't attack the preacher. Yeah, it's like, what are guys doing trying to explain to women how to deal with pregnancy? What is dumber, more ignorant, and more arrogant than that? Think of the violence that hides behind the Right to Life movement. I've said it before, it doesn't cost a guy anything to be pro-choice, to be pro-life. Doesn't have to lift a finger. And they don't lift a finger. After the baby's born, the right to life is over. As long as it's in a woman, it's something they care about. As soon as it has needs, that crimps their freedom. When you hear white people using words about people of color in this nation, with the history of racism, and say, we don't want to hear about that in our textbooks. That's pathological. That's criminal insanity. Like to come here and enslave people, rob, steal, and then say, we're going to change the textbook so the story's different. That's not going to wash, right? That is a dying worldview. So Jesus is saying this 2,000 years ago. The more research we do from a position of arrogance, the dumber we're going to get. We get off the pedestal and join the human race, right? That's the answer. And that's what Jesus means by repentance. Jesus cared about ethics. Jesus did not care about theology. If he did, he was the worst teacher of all time because he just doesn't talk about it. The church acts like that's the whole deal. But if you look at the Sermon on the Mount, it's about being kind. It's about being humble. It's about not being a moralist. The deal is not, if you don't judge the gay people, then America's going to destroy the country. It's, if you don't judge other people, God won't judge you. But if you're kicking sand in somebody else's face, that's a problem. And it's going to come back. So, I believe that the Jesus that I was taught as a child is a figment of somebody's imagination. And as I've studied the Sermon on the Mount and all of these other writings, I think that you're talking about love embodied. You're talking about wisdom embodied. So if you care about compassion and you care about wisdom, that's what Jesus is talking about. You don't have to be a Christian. You have to be Presbyterian, of course. Of course. No, you don't have to be Presbyterian, you don't have to be Christian. It's about being loving, about being wise. Because somebody that loves you doesn't want to control your mind. See, that's not love, that's abuse. When some religious figure says you should think this, you need to leave. That's abuse. When somebody says those feelings are wrong, they're bad, who you love is not the right. That's not somebody who loves you. And when somebody says you should be obedient to them, that's all you need to know, that that's the wrong bus to be on. Jesus is trying to inflame your mind, not shut it down. Jesus is trying to enlarge your heart, not shut it down. Jesus is trying to appeal to your courage, not to your fear. So be a candle to yourself. Become aware of people, animals, plants that are different to you and learn from them. Because that's God speaking to you. What Jesus is saying. Don't let your wounds define who you are. That doesn't make your wounds unimportant. They're just not ultimate. The love that's in you being born, that's what's ultimate. And then finally, to not live in a fragmented world, to not live in a world that's defined by you, but to become a cell in the common body, and to recognize that every other person you meet is your teacher, your guru, your lover, your human family. Be a candle to yourself. I invite you now to a moment of reflection to find your own interpretation of these words.